As we continue the story of King Saul and King David, again, we find the best answers to solving life's uncertainties and problems is found as we wait on the Lord for His divine purpose. Leaning to our own understanding and becoming impatient as we wait on the Lord is never the solution to the will of God. It didn't work for Sarah when she offered her maiden Hagar as a substitute or surrogate mother instead of waiting on the Lord. Hagar produced Ishmael from the flesh or from carnal reasoning. It was natural to bear a child from a younger woman as Hagar, so that's what Sarah did. But God wanted the supernatural or spiritual seed that could come only from God, as He used Sarah at the age of 90 to bear a son, Isaac. Isaac would bring about God's divine plan. But also, natural reasoning did not work when the children of Israel pressed Samuel to give them a king. Instead of accepting God as their king, or at least waiting on the heart of God to give them a king, they leaned to their own understanding because they had no idea what God was doing. So as we pick up with the question from last week asking, how could God be referring to David when He speaks to the prophet Samuel concerning King Saul's successor? Samuel says to King Saul, God has chosen him a man after His own heart to replace him as king over Israel, but David is not yet born. Saul is given this word after reigning 2 years at the age of 30 as king, which makes him 32 years old. David is born 8 years later because he is 40 years younger than King Saul, which means Saul is king for 10 years before David is born. The answer is, we have no idea of what God is doing. Isaiah 55 verses 8 through 9 says, For my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are my ways your ways, saith the Lord. For as the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts. Just as God spoke to Abraham concerning his seed 25 years before Isaac was born, God spoke concerning David before he was conceived in the womb. Even though David was not born, God spoke concerning the seed that was in Jesse, David's father, that a man after His own heart would come forth. Jesse had no idea God would choose a king from his loins, especially not David. Neither did Sarah when she laughed at what God said concerning a son coming from her womb. Yet God chose Sarah and Jesse to be a part of His divine plan. Sarah had no idea what God was doing when she gave her handmaid to Abraham, and the children of Israel had no idea what God was doing when they demanded Samuel to give them a king. Moving too soon moves you out of the will of God into trouble. Although Ishmael may have comforted Abraham from being childless and having his own biological son, the end result produced an Ishmael that we all suffer with until today. Israel got the king that they wanted, a King Saul, which resulted in Saul's suicide, the killing of his 3 sons, and countless Israelites dying at the hands of the Philistines. Instead of waiting on the king that was after God's own heart, they got a king after their own heart, a half-baked king, taken out of the oven too soon with no flavor, or should I say, no favor. So don't force things to happen your way, but let God have His way, because in the end, you have no idea of what God is doing. Get calm.